This movie is meant to demonstrate ways to use Emmet in Visual Studio Code. Emmet is a famous extension to a lot of code editors. It's been around for about 10 years. And what it basically does is it works as a macro utility. It lets you use very easy to remember and very easy to combine shortcuts to produce certain kinds of code. So this will be a quick demo of the kinds of things you can do. First of all, make a new file, a new index, a new HTML file, and right at the beginning, enter a exclamation mark and press tab. That's your first Emmet command. And what it's done is given us the HTML template, the starter template file that you'll begin all your pages with. Now, before you do anything else, if you look right now, you'll see that in line 5, the cursor is already has already selected the phrase device width. Well, this code here we don't need to change, so I'm going to press tab, and it takes us to the value of the next attribute in this viewport meta tag. Initial scale 1, we don't need to change that, so press tab. But we do need to change document. So here I'm going to change the title of my document to Emmet Demonstration. Then I'm going to press tab again. So what this first command, the exclamation mark, does is it gives us our starter template file, but it also gives us little points where we can little different points of insertion. So when we tab a couple times, we end up directly in the body. So here, let's make our first Emmet command. Typically, we will start the page with a header. So I'm going to type header and then tab. What that does is it gives me the opening and closing header tabs. And this isn't actually quite an Emmet command, but I'm going to do header dot site hyphen header. Now when I press tab, it gives me the opening and closing header tag plus the class attribute with a value of site header affixed to it. So I'm going to do Command Z. Here's my command there. I'm going to just turn this into a comment so we can save the code we're going to use. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go header.site header plus. So what plus is going to do is it's going to allow me to create a sibling of the header. So the sibling is an element that's on the same level of the document. In this case, I'm going to type main.site hyphen main. Then I'm going to make another sibling. I'm going to do footer.site footer. So what this will do when we press the tab is create 3 separate sections of the page. The header, the main area, and the footer area. And there we go. So I'm going to undo that, Command Z. I'm going to turn it into a comment. And in your own work, you don't have to be turning these into a comment. I'm just leaving it this way so you can see it on the screen if you're reviewing the movie. So a plus sign gives me siblings. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do header.site header greater than. So what greater than does is produce descendants, a relationship where one element is inside the other. So I'm going to go here, H1, curly brace, and I'm going to put in here a title for the page or the site, my website. Then I'm going to do plus H2, curly braces, my opinions on everything. Oops. Then outside the curly braces, I'm going to do plus sign, and I'm going to do nav dot site navigation greater than UL greater than LI times 6, and then another greater than A, and I'm just going to press tab. So scrolling down here, what we see we've created is a header, then we made a number of children of the header, the H1, the H2, the nav, children of the nav, the UL, children of the UL, LIs, and children of the LIs being the anchor tags. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm just going to comment that line. So what we see is greater than sign creates a child element. A plus sign creates a sibling element. Siblings are the same level. A child element is nested. Curly braces or curly brackets produce literal text. So the phrase my website, my opinions on everything. We also learn here how to multiply elements. You see where near the end of the equation I have Li times 6. This creates 6 LIs, each of which is going to have a link inside it. So I'm going to expand on that a bit more. Header.site header. Header.site header greater than H1 curly brace my website. So the H1 and the H2 are siblings. They're on the same level. They're both children of the header. Curly brace. So the text that's going to be in the H2. My opinions on everything. Okay. Then I'm going to make a nav. The nav is a sibling of the H1 and the H2, a child of the header. So nav.site navigation or site nav menu, whatever we want to call it if we're using a class here. Then I'm going to go UL greater than, so I'm making a child of the UL, LI, and I'm going to multiply that again by 6. Each one's going to have a child link. And now I want to create the attribute. Where are the links going to go? So I'm going to use square brackets here. Square brackets in CSS are called attribute selectors. So we can select any element and limit the selection to class values or the existence of classes. We can even select elements just by the attribute selectors. So I'm going to put in here href equals quotation pound sign. And all the pound sign does in this context is create a testing link. It's essentially a link to the same page. It's a link that goes nowhere really, but it allows us to see how our links will behave. So I'm going to go beyond the square bracket there, and I'm going to add one other element. This time I'm going to do a less than sign again, and I'm going to type lorem, and I'm going to make it lorem2. What this is going to do is give me two random words of sort of the fake Latinate text that graphic designers have used for years for laying out content. So I'm going to press tab now. There we go. We have a interesting or quickly built menu. I'm going to press Command Z, and I'm going to actually just do a little modification to my equation here. I'm going to go to my LI. I'm going to add a dot, so I'm going to add a class, and I'm going to put in here the word item and then $. So what the dollar sign does is iterate. It counts for us. Specifically, the first LI is going to have a class of item 01. The next one will have a class of item 02, etc. I'll show you when I get to the end. And here's an interesting little glitch in Visual Studio Code's version of Emmet. If you're right at the end, sometimes pressing tab doesn't work. But if you delete the last character, put it in again, and then press tab, it does work. And here we have, let me just simplify or move this in just a tad. Here we have a bunch of LIs, each with sequentially named classes. So the dollar sign counts. If I have two dollar signs, it'll do two places. If I had only one, it would be item 1, item 2, item 3, instead of item 01, item 02, item 03. So I'm going to Command Z that. This time I'm going to copy it before turning it into a comment. That way I don't have to retype it and bore you. So I've got the same thing here. What I'm wanting to do next is add in the main, add some articles. So what I could do, if I add a plus sign right now, I would be creating a sibling of the lorem text. And there are ways to get back up out of the various levels of nesting. Here is possibly the easiest one. I'm just going to put a bracket around everything. And it's like grade 9 math again. When we put it in the bracket, that content inside gets treated like a single thing. So if I put a plus sign after this bracket, it means that I'm going to make a sibling of the heading, because everything inside the brackets is actually a child or a further descendant of the header. Okay, so here I'm going to put main, and if I want, I could actually use brackets here to make this section a little simpler to understand. I'm going to do main.siteMain, and inside it I'm going to do article times 4 greater than, I'm going to say here h3 dot article hyphen title for my class. And here I'm going to go greater than sign. I'm going to do lorem 4. So I'm making an h3 with a class, an h3 with 4 words of random text. Okay. So next I'm going to do a plus sign. And here we're going to have to come back to this. I'm going to do something a little bit wrong. And I'll explain how it doesn't do what we expect. So I'm going to put in a P here, and I'm going to say I want 3 paragraphs greater than, each with 16 words in it. Okay. So now I'm going to go to the end. That little glitch I told you about will probably come up. The tab doesn't work, but I'm going to remove the last character, put it in again. Let's try that again. Okay, something is not quite working here. Let me see. To troubleshoot, I'm just going to simplify. I'm going to take these brackets out. It'll create a problem for us, but there we are. So what that might have been is I learned Emmet using another editor called Atom, and before that Sublime Text. And each time you use something you're used to in a different program, it can sometimes behave a little differently. So what we're seeing here, we get a header, class a site header. If I fold that element each of these elements here, we see we have a header, and a sibling of the header is the main. Inside the header, we have an H1 and H2, a nav, inside of which is a UL. Each LI has a sequentially numbered class. We have testing links. That's followed by the main. Each main has an article in it, but here's where the problem is. If you look at the article here on screen, my H3 has a class of article title, 4 fake Latinate words, and then immediately inside it, it has 3 paragraphs of random text. So what we've created are nested paragraphs inside our H3. We see the opening and closing of the H3 here encompasses the paragraphs. So we screwed up a little, and that's what I was referring to when I said this isn't going to quite work, but I wanted to do it anyway. So I'm going to press Command Z, and I'm going to go back to my equation. And what we see here, after we see main.sitemain greater than article H3 article title greater than, creating a lower level for the lorem 4, the 4 random words. Then we immediately put in sibling paragraphs, 3 paragraphs of 16 random words. The trouble is we're making them a sibling of the lorem 4 text. So what we need to do is change this plus sign here to what's known as the caret symbol, and it's created by doing Shift 6, at least on a Mac, I assume on Windows too. Think of it this way. It looks like an arrow pointing up. What this is doing is taking us one level up in the nesting hierarchy. So I'm going to again go to the end of the line, and I'm going to remove one character, and I'm going to press Tab. Now we see our H3s open and close before the paragraph, the next 3 paragraphs come in, and then the article closes. So if we look here, if we think about what we have created, we've learned how to build pages for building our layouts very, very quickly. We've learned how to make sibling elements, child elements, how to use classes, how to make attribute selectors, how to number stuff sequentially, and how to move up in our nesting. Before we end this movie, I want to show you one additional thing. I'm going to go after the last article here inside the main. And let's imagine here we want to put in a picture gallery. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to just type in here gallery, .gallery. And when it's a dot, it's like in CSS, it's a class. If I just press Tab now, what happens is that Emmet assumes I want a div, and that's fine. We will say we want a div here. But inside that, I'm going to put in here img. I'm going to do square bracket, which is an attribute selector, and the attribute we want here is source equals quotation mark. So the source attribute tells us tells the browser where to find the image. And imagine I have images in this project. I don't actually right now, but imagine I do. With a path, typically might be something like this. I'll say images / and maybe I'll call this person. Then I'm going to do $$.jpg. So the idea here is I've got a bunch of images inside an images folder. Each image is called person 01, person 02, person 03, etc. I'm also going to put an additional attribute on my image. In this case, it's going to be the alt attribute, and I'm going to put in here just something like this. Random person, because we don't have a name for the person. And yeah, let's see. Oh yeah, the last thing I'm going to do, I'm going to put right after IMG, I'm going to do multiplication symbol, the star symbol. I'm going to say here 24. So I've got a gallery of 24 images. And maybe I will add after it a sibling. Actually, let's do this. Let's go as the first child of gallery. I'm going to change this a little bit. We're making an image. I'm going to wrap that image in a div. So I'm going to call this a class of person, inside of which is an image, which has two attributes. But we're also going to put inside the person div the name of the person. So we will say, let's just imagine this person is an H. We'll put an H4 and we'll go here lorem2. So the idea then is each person will have an image, will have an H4 level heading with two random words. Each of those is going to be wrapped in a single div called person. And I'm going to go here, say star or the multiplication symbol. I'm going to say here 24. So we're going to create a div with a class of gallery, 24 divs with a class of person. And if we wanted, we could actually have multiple classes here. So I'm going to do person dot person $$. This is going to then make a div with a class of person. So there'll be 24 divs with a class of person, but each div will also have a class of person 01, person 02, and so on. So let's try this again. Voila. We've created, very quickly, very reliably, consistently, and adroitly, a lot of code on the page that we can then style however way we want. So I'm going to undo that just so you can see the movie will end with this equation. Yeah, so what we learned from that last equation is iterating multiple classes on an element, making divs just by giving them a class. We don't even have to specify div. And we also learned how to make multiple classes on a single element. Oh, for fuck's sake, it wasn't recording.